A copy of that, of your,
I'll submit it after I'm done.
we'll see that everybody gets a copy of that before we leave. Representative Bath.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, Hannah, are the questions on there that were asked? Rather than just the results, I want to know, I want the questions that you asked.
I believe it's just results, but I can double check.
Thanks.
The questions are on there, I'm being told, Representative Chair.
Further questions, Representative Holtzclaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Sharp, is your main concern with Senate Bill 1389, is it just education for individuals to have before they can exercise their Second Amendment right?
Ms. Sharp?
Chairman and Representative Holtzclaw, I believe that the current permit system is a good system. And so having the background check and also the training is important. So it's not, my issue is not just with the training. Thank you.
Further questions? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Could you give that to our page and she'll copy it and give us a copy of that? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Bath.
Thank you. And I just saw my notes here, and I apologize. Mr. Cheney, when he testified, said he was representing the Second Amendment Alliance, and I received a call from one of my constituents who's part of that, and they just wanted to note the 11,000 signatures. They didn't know if they needed to recopy all of that and then submit it, or if we can just note it in our minutes that those were submitted in the Senate of the 11,000 support.
Without objection, that could happen.
Thank you.
We'll be done. I'm going to say this in the German fashion. Fred Birnbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. My name is Fred Birnbaum. I'm with the Idaho Freedom Foundation, and I'm here to speak in favor of Senate Bill 1389. And actually, I'm glad we had that conversation a minute ago about the poll, because I did download the poll, and I'm going to actually read the question, and I'll be more than happy to share the poll itself. It's a Survey USA poll. The sponsor was Everytown for Gun Safety. And the survey, I believe, was a bit of a push poll. I'm going to read it exactly as it was written. Under current law, people are required to have a permit in order to carry a concealed handgun in public places. In order to get a permit, people may need to complete a handgun safety training course and must pay a processing fee. Do you strongly support, oppose, or strongly oppose requiring permits to carry a concealed handgun in public in Idaho? Now, as has been pointed out a numerous number of times, and today as well, you do not need a permit if you're outside city limits. If someone called me and asked me that question, I would assume a public place is any place outside my home. Certainly it sounds that way, or could be interpreted that way. I think if you called people and you said to them, are you aware that no permit is required for open carry outside of cities? No permit is required for open carry inside of cities. No permit is required for concealed carry outside of city limits. Does it make sense to only require a permit for carry inside city limits? You might get a different answer. And I think the other objection that was brought up is that this legislation revokes decades of concealed carry licensure. I mean, they have it wrong. I mean, to say that when 3 or 4 examples I just gave, you didn't even need a permit. So I don't think it revokes the need where you didn't need one in 3 of the 4 cases. And let's talk about where you do need one inside city limits. There is currently required, as has been pointed out, there's a permitting fee, there's a background check, and there's training. But let's, I mean, the fee is the fee. I think we all get that. Yes, you do, a background check is required. But if you couldn't pass one, why would you attempt to get the permit if you could carry it openly? Now, of course, if you couldn't carry it because you're prohibited, then you'd be breaking the law. So I think that distinction that somehow this would prevent criminals because there's a background check, it really doesn't make any sense, because criminals carry firearms and they don't really consider the background check to be their issue. So I guess I don't understand the logic there. I do think it's important that we emphasize the legal patchwork we currently have. So if I live in a rural area, I walk into town, I have a sidearm on, I'm wearing a coat. If I take my coat off as I enter city limits, I'm fine. If I leave my coat on, and if I don't have that permit, I've violated the law. So I would consider that really more of a patchwork than a proper legal standard. I realize that the permitting process goes back a long time, and as Senator McKenzie alluded to, in 1909, it actually was a permit required inside cities, but outside cities as well, for mining and logging camps, which really brings back a bygone era. So if you think about it, perhaps the permit was required back then because it was assumed that people might be carrying them concealed for nefarious purposes, because people often carried guns. And maybe the mining and logging camps had to do with fights and alcohol or something. But I do think when you think about the fact that 3 or 4 cases you don't need a permit, this really cleans up the statutes and doesn't put law-abiding citizens in harm's way in terms of violating the law just for the fact that they may or may not wear a coat. I do want to talk about a couple other things. This had come up earlier, and I'll stand for questions. The 18 to 21-year-old issue. So now those in that category outside city limits could open carry, and this legislation says if you're in that age category, you have to get an enhanced permit. And some might ask, well, should anybody 18 to 21 be able to get any type of concealed permit? But you have to remember, you cannot purchase a firearm, a handgun, let me clarify that, a handgun unless you're 21 years old. It's a federal law. So really, we're talking about a very, very narrow slice here. You'd have to have someone who's over 21, like a parent, be willing to convey a firearm to you, and you'd have to take an enhanced class. So I understand the concern about allowing those in that age category to get an enhanced permit. But remember, those in that age category can carry openly, they can hunt, they can carry semi-automatic rifles. So I think that's a very narrow sliver, and we shouldn't be concerned about that. So I thank you, and I stand for questions.
Are there questions? Representative Nielsen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, on the 1821, I don't know why we're so concerned about that. You can be drafted or put into the military at age 18 or even a little younger if you fib about it a little bit, and you're taught what to do there. And I'm really struggling with the fact that if you're old enough to go to war, why can't you be old enough to carry?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nielsen.
Baum. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nielsen, I wasn't making the argument for or against permitless carry for those 18 to 21. I was merely pointing out that the higher level of restrictions, which you might be objecting to, don't create a situation where it is easier for someone of that age, because federal law does not allow someone under the age of 21 to purchase a handgun. Now, we can disagree that. I served in the military, and at that age you can drive a tank, or fire a bazooka, but that's really not the issue today. I understand your distinction, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.